Has it ever happened to you that one day you do something, you think something, or you say something that you know is wrong? And wrong from your perspective, from your morals, from your values, from your ideals. You may do something, you may say something, you may think something that is wrong, and you feel this uncomfortable psychological state. You may call it guilt, and it may most often be reflected as guilt, but it's overall, an uncomfortable psychological feeling because we know that we did something that we were not supposed to be doing. We thought something that we were not supposed to be thinking, or we felt something that we were not supposed to be feeling. You're not alone if you've experienced that. Most of us have. And that is one of the most important contributions from the field of social psychology to psychology in general. This idea is called cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance, in a way, refers to a psychological discomfort that we experience when two of our attitudes clash. We think one thing, but we end up doing another thing, and this clash creates a sense of uncomfortable feeling here. And it's because we're not being consistent. So, a couple of years ago, I had for a long time been saving money because I wanted to buy my own house. I had been living in apartments long enough. It was time for me to finally make an investment on my own. And I had this decision, do I want to go to Juarez or El Paso? Because I had been in El Paso for a while, but I was raised in Juarez, and I'm like, well, technically it could be in either place. So for a long time I thought about it, and I said, let's do Juarez. I put up my money in there, and I had put up the down payment. But then, it was in 2018 when the migrant caravan from Central America was coming, and I was realizing that the bridge was now kind of an unstable situation. There were too many obstacles to come back to El Paso on a daily basis, and I'm like, For a long time, I had been telling friends, family, and so forth that I was eventually going to buy a house in Juarez. But this situation emerged, and I'm kind of like doubting myself. And I went out with a friend of mine that is a realtor. He showed me a beautiful house in El Paso, and I fell in love with it. Hell, let me move over here. So I ended up buying the house where I record everything is in El Paso. It's in the house that I ended up buying. So I took the money from the down payment and instead put a down payment for a house in El Paso. But I felt so odd about it because I had been talking for years that I was going to move to Juarez. It is my choice and my decision. I have no one else to be responsible for but me. Yet still I was feeling kind of uncomfortable for that. And it hits me. It's because I took a decision that was going against what I had been saying and what I had been believing for a while. Why should I feel odd about this? I don't want to say that I felt guilty, but I just felt odd about it. And that's because I was experiencing cognitive dissonance. So, it's not always reflected as guilt, but it's just an uncomfortable state of mind that we experience. When we experience cognitive dissonance, which by the way is a term that was proposed by one of the founders, or you can say one of the main earlier names in the field of social psych, Leon Festinger. And cognitive dissonance refers to this, again, psychological discomfort that results in either one of two choices. When we experience this sense of discomfort, either we change our behavior. We change our behavior because we're going to try to adjust our behavior to do what we feel is right according to the attitude. So, in my case, modify the behavior. If I'm feeling kind of odd about me buying a house in El Paso, to try to make myself feel normal or feel better again, what I'm going to do is then take off the money from the down payment and instead again place it in Juarez. Because I'm shifting the behavior so it's in line and I have a consistent point. My actions and my thoughts are on the same track. Not on the right track, but on the same track, you know? The other is to rationalize the thoughts. So, rationalize it is just creating in our way, I don't want to say excuses, but creating thoughts that would make us feel like we took the right choice. So, rationalization in my mind would be like thinking, man, it's because the bridge is going to be so tough. But I mean, and realize like in this house over here, I'm in a safer place of town. I'm not going to have to worry that much about, you know, the public school systems because my kids can go to the school system here instead of, my kids are going to grow up in a bilingual environment instead of a monolingual environment. Like I'm in my mind creating all this, I don't want to say excuses, but all these thoughts to realize that I made the right choice, or to make me believe that I made the right choice. That is rationalization. So if we have those two options, modifying behavior or rationalizing thoughts, which one do you think is most common? Rationalization, by far. If we encounter ourselves doing something that goes against ourselves, or at least our ideals or morals, changing the behavior to do the right thing, or not the right thing, but the consistent thing is tough. It's more likely that we tend to rationalize. We don't like to feel that psychological discomfort, so we try to find ways to make ourselves feel normal or better. This again now can be taken and like divided into a lot of different categories within cognitive dissonance. And by the way, I'm very disappointed that in the book that we're reviewing for this class, they barely cover for a couple pages what's cognitive dissonance. And I decided to keep this as a separate lecture because it's such an important topic that I feel like it deserves much more consideration. Hence why you don't have an entire chapter on cognitive dissonance, but I'm giving a whole week just to discuss this topic. In the field of cognitive dissonance, there are some classic studies in the field of psychology. And I want to discuss a little bit because those two refer to like subcategories within cognitive dissonance. It's still cognitive dissonance, but it's reflected in different ways that have their own unique terms. So the first one is justification of effort. And this comes from one of the classic studies in the field by Aronson. And this study was very interesting. And it's a classic because of all the research that came after it. It influenced a lot of researchers to tackle on this topic more in depth. And what they did for this study, informally, is called the Psychology Sex Club experiment. So what they did is the researchers promoted in their university a Psychology Sex Club experiment. This was in the 50s, so people were not too liberal then. To hear about a Psychology Sex Club experiment sounded kind of exciting. Not common at all. So a lot of students were interested, but the researchers created two groups. One group being the control, they were going to get in the sex club right away. That's a control group. The other group had to take on a series of tasks. That is not important to know the tasks. What is important is to know that they made them like work to get there. They had to work and work and work to get there. Finally, they are accepted into the club. In reality, the club was just about discussions, talks, but it was very boring, very technical. The researchers were trying to make the sex club very boring. So you have two groups. One group went in right away and saw the club for what the club was. Whatever, it's boring. The other group, however, had to suffer because they have to work their way to get in. So they got in, they see the club for what it was, but still, they worked so hard to be in there for this boring stuff. It was evoking in their mind cognitive dissonance. In their mind, they were like, no, this is fun. I like this club. They were trying to rationalize their thought to make them believe that all their effort was worth it. It was a beautiful experiment when they were tracking surveys for how long they lasted, how much they enjoyed the club, and so on. It was like a big difference for how much the people that had to work to get in the club enjoyed it in comparison to those that just went in right away. Beautiful study. Now, quick example. Counter-attitudinal advocacy. I apologize if it's a little bit dark because it's right now it's kind of late. But counter-attitudinal advocacy is another subcategory. And this is very much simply when you're forced to say something that goes against yourself, you may feel that sense again of displeasure, which is dissonance. So you don't want to feel like that. If you're forced to say something and you don't believe in it, you're going to try to find a way to rationalize your thoughts so what you said conforms or looks more like what you believe in. And they say informally saying becomes believing. And from this comes another classic study in the field of social psych related to cognitive dissonance. And this is the study actually by the person that proposed the term, Leo Festinger. And in this one, classic study in the field, they had two different groups of students, participants, and they had to do a series of manual tasks, and they were told that they were gonna get paid to do this, to participate in this study. What they had to do, the task was manual, and it was meant to be boring, like super boring. And the participants had to spend a whole hour on this task, working. And they were promised that they would get a reward by the end. So you have two different groups of people. One group, the reward, and both it was monetary, but for one group they were going to be paid $1. For the other group, they were going to get paid $20. And this was back in the 50s, so that was a lot of money for the $20. It was like you getting paid like $100 right now. So it's like a lot of money for the time. They were finished, they were paid, and then the researchers would approach and be like, hey, you know what? There's a participant coming up next, which in reality was a Confederate. But the researcher would tell the participant, hey, there's a participant coming up next. We know that this may not be the most fun task, but we want you guys to help us out to get him pumped. So please tell him that it was an exciting task. Please, make it seem like it was an exciting task. So the participants in the study were forced to say that it was a cool, fun, exciting task, when in reality they were bored out of their minds. But they were getting paid, and they were forced to say that it was a fun experiment. So all the participants did, the Confederate came in. So the Confederate, again, is a participant an assistant that is disguised as a participant. So they were telling them, oh man, this is an awesome experiment. Love it so much, it's fantastic, you're gonna get so much fun out of this, and so on. You have the $1 group, and you have the $20 group. After they're done with this, they're asked, by the way, what do you thought about the task? The people that were paid $20 had enough justification to say, I lied and I said that it was exciting, but I was getting paid for it. There's enough justification in the money to say that it was worth it. So the reality is the task was boring. They would say, in their mind, they're aware that they're lying, but they're getting paid to lie. However, here's the very interesting thing. The other group were paid only $1. They didn't have enough of a justification for the money that they received to say that they lied for the money. Dissonance was going through their mind, so instead they began to rationalize to say, I lied and I told these people that it was a fun experiment. I'm not getting paid that much to say that, so I guess if I said it because of that, I must have liked it. And they ended up saying that it was actually a fun, cool experiment. It wasn't. But think about it. They were not paid enough, so they felt this psychological discomfort, and it made them think that they actually enjoyed the experiment. Saying becomes believing. When we experience dissonance, it's very hard to change our behavior. The easier thing to do is to rationalize, and that's an outcome of an automatic and very lazy mindset. So you gotta be very careful to close this thought off. You gotta be very careful because in the essence of human behavior overall, it's our behavior, as you have learned from the cognitive dissonance, from the cognitive fallacies and now from cognitive dissonance, our behavior as humans running on an automatic mind is not so much about acting rational, but about rationalizing our actions. All of that can be avoided when you use your conscious, deliberate mindset. If it is within your means, your chances to be acting and thinking consciously, do so. Good lesson, guys. Well done.